In 2024, 43% of Americans said that they felt more anxious than they did the year before. So if you're struggling with anxiety, guess what? You're not alone and you are definitely not broken. And today we're going to look at some strategies and some different ways that we can calm that anxiety and regain a sense of peace. Now, I don't consider myself a particularly anxious person, but this year for my birthday, my son gave me a copy of the book, Building a Non-Anxious Life by Dr. John Deloney, and the insights that I found in this book were incredibly helpful. Now, Deloney takes a particularly holistic approach to the subject of anxiety, and really he's all about creating the conditions in our lives that foster peace. He suggests that anxiety is sort of a result or a symptom of lacking these things in our life rather than being a condition in itself. He lists 6 daily choices that we can make to create that non-anxious lives for ourselves, and I thought I would share them with you today. And the first choice that he says to make is to choose reality. And this is to actually just be honest about our work, be honest about our relationships, be honest about the condition of our lives. It's about taking honest inventory and being honest again about our lives and the condition of our lives, no matter how ugly that might be. Choosing reality is actually where healing begins, and it's about taking responsibility for our lives. Now, there's a thing called denial, and I think that we have all sort of lived in denial about the choices we've made or lived in denial about the conditions that we're in, and we've blamed others rather than taking a look at ourselves. True story, back in the day, we had this program at our church called Royal Rangers. And one night, my friend Joe and I, who we were troublemakers together, I'll be honest about that, we ditched Royal Rangers and we hid in the supply closet that night. Of course, we're just 6th graders, keep that in mind. And we hid in the supply closet during Royal Rangers and we made a huge mess of it. We tossed around everything we could find, from papers to coffee grounds to whatever. And guess what? We got busted. And we got busted in the middle of that thing, and we were sent upstairs to the boring adult service. And as we sat there, kicked out of Royal Rangers, we passed notes to each other in the adult service. And those notes said things like, "I can't believe they did that. We didn't deserve to be kicked out. We didn't really even do anything. It wasn't even that big of a mess or that big of a deal." And we were not honest at all about what we did. And we do that as adults too. And I've known so many people who have gotten fired from job after job after job after job, or lost relationship after relationship, or had marriages fail over and over and over again. And guess what? It was always the boss's fault, or it was always the other person's fault. Choose reality. It is the very first step towards healing and building a non-anxious life. And the next choice that we need to make to build a non-anxious life is to choose connection. And that's building friendships and spending time with people in the real world. And I know that a lot of us are connected online. It seems like we're always leaving messages or texting, or we're connecting with people over Facebook. But it's real world connections, actually being where people are, that helps to build the conditions in our life that fight anxiety, because loneliness actually ramps up the threat levels or threat chemicals in our lives, and that can actually just lead to more anxiety. And the third choice is to choose freedom. Now, what he means by this in the book is creating margin in our lives, and that can be time margin. That can definitely mean financial margin. And so it's all about creating space. This can also mean decluttering our physical surroundings, decluttering our schedule, decluttering our task lists, because clutter is actually perceived by the brain as chaos. And you guessed it, chaos leads to anxiety. Number 4 is choosing mindfulness. Now, mindfulness can be described as creating space between what happens and how we interpret it. So if someone cuts you off on the road and you interpret it as that person's just a jerk without really thinking much about it, that can create anxiety. But if something happens, that same person cuts you off on the road and you give yourself a little space and time to interpret that event, maybe that person's in an emergency, or maybe they're having a bad day, whatever it is, but creating some space between what happens and how we interpret it. It's about being aware of our thoughts and how we respond to circumstances. And a lot of this just means being curious instead of reactive. So many times we judge rather than being curious. Stop, ask yourself some questions. If you need to ask that person a question, ask them some questions. It's so easy to just knee-jerk react, but be mindful, create some space between what just happened and how you interpreted it and how you're going to react. Number 5 is to choose health and healing. This is about doing the hard work of healing, and healing is hard work. And so many times we try to avoid that. Sometimes therapy can be what we need, but instead we try to find a shortcut. We take a vacation, we have a drink, but those things don't help to build a non-anxious life. And healing isn't just for old emotional wounds, healing is for our body as well. And Dr. Deloney talks about taking care of our bodies, helping them to be strong, because when we are strong and healthy, it signals to our brains that we are more safe. In addition to that, trauma is really just our body reacting in the present to what happened to us in the past. The old saying that the body keeps the score is so true. And sometimes we don't even realize it, but we might be getting sick over and over again, or we might be experiencing aches and pains over something that happened to us a long time ago. And A, we didn't get therapy, we didn't go through healing, and B, we really haven't been taking care of our bodies through proper nutrition and exercise. And the combination of those two things is a recipe for anxiety. And number 6 is to choose belief. And this is about putting our faith in Jesus. In my case, I put my faith in him. And this can be difficult sometimes because we like to be in control. We want to be in control of our lives. But choosing belief is about surrendering control to a higher power, surrendering control to the Lord and trusting in him. Because at the end of the day, most of the things that we're anxious about, we can't really do anything about anyway, but we can trust him and that he can. I just love that Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. And I know that I can go to him and that he can be my source of peace in the midst of anxious circumstances. In my life, prayer and prayer journaling and scripture reading are a total non-negotiable, because without those things, I feel like I would probably be a wreck. I would be a very anxious person. It helps to bring peace and it helps to create an eternal perspective. So how about you? Which of these things do you need to practice daily to create the conditions in your life for greater peace? Because even if you're not a particularly anxious person, practicing these things will actually create the conditions to preserve your peace and protect your peace. When's the best time to plant a tree? Yesterday. When's the next best time? Today. And you can begin to plant those seeds and create those conditions so that even later on, if anxiety-inducing circumstances come into your life, you'll have these beliefs in place to guard you. Maybe anxiety isn't even on your radar, but you might be a particularly negative person. And if that's the case, then check out this video here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you over in the next video.